So first and foremost, wanted to thank Tom and Dean for being here today as kind of like a panelist discussion to kind of go over some important topics. This one today is really talking a little bit more about planning for some of the unexpected things that maybe you just really didn't think about as you were considering a transition or doing things inside of the business either way. And just really just kind of leave it open as a discussion. So I kind of have a list of questions that I'm going to go through with both Tom and Dean, but there's a chat box down at the bottom of your screen. And if you wish to ask a question at any point, go ahead and just type your question in there, and we'll be happy to get it over to either Tom or Dean or both of them. So for those who, just real quickly though, for those who are unfamiliar with who Prometis Partners is, we are a value acceleration and exit planning company. Our primary focus is to prepare the business and the business owner for a transition, not really knowing what that transition may be. It may start in one direction and go in another. We're really just trying to build that out, understanding who should be where and kind of how to move the pieces around to make sure that the business continues to sustain and grow itself and becomes a more transferable business at some point when the owner decides to transfer it. So with that said, thank all of you for the participants who are here today to kind of ask questions and kind of listen in. So let's just kind of go ahead and get started. Tom and Dean, again, thanks for being here. Let's just kind of start off first and foremost. Dean, let me ask you a question, and then I'll go over to Tom. You've been a business owner for a while. What was it that really kind of moved you in the direction to want to be a business owner?
Good morning, Vince. Yes, thanks for the question. Well, I was looking at my career, and then I saw an opportunity to really take a hold of my career a little bit more and build my own future in an area that I felt I had some expertise in, and I felt it was profitable. So as I looked at the forward planning for my future career there, I saw that I really was good at what I was doing, and I wanted to do it on my own. So I took that opportunity and took that leap of faith, and saw that was a path forward. So
yeah, it's been a nice journey. Just for those as information, Dean is in the process of making another acquisition for his business, and so that's awesome, and it just kind of continues to grow. Tom, you've been in business for some time. You bought out the previous owner in the business, and certainly now moving your son more into the ownership and taking it over a period of time. When you kind of look back at when you started and came into the business and were approached to buy it, what was it that really kind of attracted you to go from working there to really being an owner?
I guess opportunity and timing. I was at a point, I would say similar to Dean. I was at a point where I was trying to measure what I could do for the rest of my life, how things were going to fit in, and I was borderline going back to school, heading toward an engineering degree, when this opportunity came up, and I took it from there. I really had no thought process of even owning a business until the owner approached me about buying it from him. I just had more intent of trying to find a job where I could be happy doing the things I do and enjoying the time off the things I do during my time off. So when opportunity came to own an excavating business, which I was working for, all I could think of was, cool, I can keep playing around in the winter and doing my skiing and work in the summer like I'm doing now. And it has mostly worked out in that direction.
Yeah.
That was it.
Interesting. You know, the independence of being your own business owner is always very attractive, but it's certainly it's another parallel or another level that we all have to go through as individuals. Did you find, either one of you, did you find any challenges once you kind of sat in that owner seat that maybe you really weren't prepared for, or you weren't that you were unaware of?
Go ahead, Dean.
Hey, yeah, so interesting enough, when I was out yesterday and was out for a hike, and in an area that they started off the hike said the road ahead is lonely. So as you venture out into this entrepreneurial ownership, there are times when you do rely on other people, and other times it can be lonely. So that's one of the unexpected challenges. When you're involved in a working for somebody else, there's procedures and processes in place, and you work through those, and you work with the company to grow there. But the road ahead can be lonely, but if you're involved with other uh, meetings or other people, groups like SCORE, I found that helpful.
Yeah. Anything with you, Tom, that any specific challenges you felt that you may have had, kind of becoming an owner?
Well, the truth is, when I got into it, I really had no clue about how to run a business. I knew how to run my personal finances. I was pretty good at that. I knew how to budget things, and I get along with people well. So I didn't think it was that great of a challenge, but it became one. It's learning about taxes and learning about government regulations, learning about continued employee relationships as we went from 4 to over 30. All those things are things I, in essence, learned on the fly. Uh, and I would say that knowing people who are in the business, knowing people who are willing to share, uh, was very helpful along the way. Pressing for resources, asking people if they happen to be a resource for help. Sometimes your help is not always where you think it might be. The equipment dealers were able to help me establish patterns for cost, which I guess I didn't really expect from them, but in retrospect, certainly they should have known that, and I should have expected it. Um, my bookkeeper, my dad was a sales manager, and all of those people were important as I got things going.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the communication between Tom, between the previous ownership and then to you, and maybe kind of compare that to maybe what you learned when you first took over the business a number of years back, and what challenges that may have kind of caused in the process. Maybe they weren't intentional, just could just be the way that they were, and how you've kind of maybe looked at that differently as you start to transition out and bring your son in. Any differences there?
Well, I think so. The prior owner was also very people friendly, and he was a bit of a tinker and liked to play around with things and was very casual about how he ran the business. He'd gone through a partnership that he had already been in the process of buying that partner back out. He only had, at peak, maybe 6 or 7 of us working for him. Every morning we go down for coffee. Sometimes it'd be 15 minutes, sometimes it'd be an hour. Sometimes he wouldn't show up to the job for an hour or two. And one of the things that helped there is that we had to take over and do things on our own and figure it out. So that was I guess, a benefit in disguise. But he was very casual, and I'm much more precise. I've got a good handle on all of my costs and all of my numbers, and for the most part, and I realized that also that the people that I work with have to be on board with me. You have to communicate with those people, and that part was actually somewhat lacking from the prior owner. It was well, go get the job done, figure it out, and that worked for me. I mean, we got it done, and he managed to keep his customers, which I rolled into. But I think it works a lot better when you have a plan, and that is affecting how I'm moving forward. Although albeit quite differently, because when I only had 4 employees, it was really quite easy to do a little bit of everything. And now with over 30, I can't expect my son to just drop in and go like I did. So unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it is somewhat unfortunate. There's a lot of stuff that being the first owner, if you will, in the family, and trying to pass that on, is a little bit more difficult because so much is up. You learn and you think, oh, they'll know that, and they really don't. So the challenge really is getting what I've learned over the 30 plus years out of me and into him, and into the others that are helping to support him.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's some some really good points, Tom. Thanks for sharing. I think it's important, different generations and just people in general communicate differently, and certainly, there always can be some unexpected, surprises, so to speak. Hopefully, they're not too large in being able to handle it, but just being able to think through all the things that you can really have to deal with as you go through that, and make sure the communication is there, I think is really important. Dean, when you came into the business, did you experience anything from the previous ownership, how that transition was, some of the communication when you got started in your business?
Well, I'd say I'd have to agree with Tom there. The knowledge that you gain as an owner and the experience that you gain as an owner, you transferring that over and communicating that your experiences to the next person, and then trying to figure out and plan who's going to be able to handle what area is key. And in doing so, what you think that one person might be the best seat for wasn't always the case. So trying to look at all the different experiences and see who can best fit into those spots was a bit of a challenge. But if you give yourself enough time out and plan it out, I think that really is helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, would you both agree that kind of the time, meaning the longer the runway, the better off you are to make these transactions happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree.
yeah, yeah. Give yourself enough time to get that plane up in the air, so to speak, and kind of get it running, which is great. You guys are kind of at, certainly different industries, but you kind of at this particular moment going down a little bit different path. Tom, you're looking to transition over to your son, and Dean, you're running the business and just made another acquisition, and at some point down the road, you'll make some decisions as to how you're going to move on from there. Tom, let me just stay with you a little bit, because transferring a business, whether you gift it or sell it, is not the conversation. But transferring the ownership of a business over to your children is a big ask for the current ownership, because you're really asking the next generation to take over what you've really built up. And it's your baby, right? You built it when it started 30 some odd years ago. You took it over from the previous owner. Talk to me or the group a little bit about some of the challenges in making that happen with the next generation. I mean, where do you see the kind of some of the differences and challenges that can happen in that process?
Oh man, there's a lot of them.
I know, but we only have 45 minutes left. I'm just kidding.
Listening to Dean and reflecting on what I'd already said, one of the interesting transitions that happens is you have to make a move away from being the doer to being a teacher. And in the process of becoming a teacher, you have to remember that you're not teaching your method, you're teaching how to get results. And one person's method to get the same result may be different than your method. I don't expect my son to do things exactly, well, I shouldn't say that. I expect my son to do them the same way I do, but the reality is he's going to do them differently. And as long as he gets the result, it really shouldn't be my job to question the means. If the result is good and it produces and continues to produce what he's after and what I'm after, then questioning the method is something I have to open my mind up to and allow him to take the reins and do it his way. 30 years ago, I took it and did it my way, and it worked. So now I have to have faith that he's going to do it his way and it will work. I don't know if that answered everything you asked there. Probably not. There is a lot in that, but you do move from being the doer to being the teacher.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of, the different roles that you have to play when you're kind of handing over the torch to the next generation. Is you have to not only prepare them to be able to carry that torch, but you have to let them kind of do it their way, and kind of understand, both generations, I think, need to understand how is their way going to take this company to the next level or continue it on and sustain it through time, right? You did it the way that you needed to do it, Tom, for the era that you took over the business. And certainly in 2021, and as we move forward, the next generation will have to say, okay, how are we going to manage business in today's environment to sustain it and grow this business, right?
Yep. Rather interesting, if you will, is way back when I bought the business, right away, my dad said to me, don't change what you're doing. He said, go find somebody to run the business for you. I did
Mm-hmm.
take a run at that. I was unsuccessful at finding that person, so I became that person.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the reality, uh, I got to thinking that I was being pressured into get this thing going, make it happen, and I ran out of what I'll call time, management time, to pursue that person. I think there's a lot of validity to bringing people on board that will help you achieve your goal and having them perform those tasks to the point where if you want to leave, if you disappear, if you want to sell, the and I know Vince has been telling me this, but when I look back in time, the bottom line is you have to take you as an owner out of the go-to position, and you can sit back and observe, you can sit back and direct, but you have to let people have the reins and you have to let them run it. And in fact, for a truly healthy atmosphere, you have to, even for yourself, I think you got to go out and get somebody to run that business for you. And you still are the president or the chairperson or whatever you want to call yourself, the owner, and you still have direct control, but you implement the use of your hammer very lightly. As long as they're not doing something wrong, they're moving you forward and helping you, then they're doing their job. And in retrospect, I wish I'd have done that way back at the beginning and taken the time to find somebody to run it, because I suspect that I could have built an even bigger, better situation. I think I've done really well. I don't want to take away from that. My son's going to do really well. But in the end, I think my son is headed down that road. He wants to have people that are going to work for him that are doing that job, and he's going to oversee that and steer it. But he's not going to be if there's a problem, it's Joe's problem or Sarah's problem or whoever you want to call it. And he'll be the ultimate problem solver if they can't solve it. But I think he's really looking to have good management on staff to help him make the business continue to be what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. I think that's a great point. Working on the business, being a visionary, kind of the driver of what direction the company needs to go, and communicating that out to your leadership team, and making that grow. Dean, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that? Anything that from your experiences?
Well, the big part of that, I feel that, as Tom had mentioned, the communication is being able to communicate what needs to be done and when it should be done is a big part of that challenge. You don't always have time to communicate what you want and how things should be done. And of that, people hear, as a teacher, to your point, as a teacher, Tom, people will hear things differently at different times. So if you're continually communicating what and how needs to be done, then I think that's the key, is to get through the handoff is the communication.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, Dean, what's it like, certainly when you're taking a business, when you're buying the business, right? What's it like when you have to mesh with the current leadership and culture, right? Because usually, depending on where you are in that cycle, that culture is probably more in line with the current generation of owner, and sometimes pretty close to their age. And so certainly there's a potential risk, just depending on the structure of the company, that you could have an exodus of people when new ownership comes in, just because of their age, and they want to kind of move on to the next phase of their lives too. Did you have any set processes when you started to meet the culture, and how did that kind of go through? Any unique challenges that you had in there?
Sure, thanks. That's a good question, because as you look at any transition, people are always going to, that you're moving into, people there are thinking to themselves, well, I wonder what's going to change, and how's it going to change, and how's it going to affect me. So people will always ask, how can we do what we're doing, but at the same time, how can we grow and move forward? So again, sitting down with individuals and talking through how they've done things and getting an understanding of the different aspects of their job was helpful. And then taking that information and putting it all together to create work that into the plan that we had, as to how does this work with our 5-year, 10-year plan down the road, and does this person have the skills to do this and then grow to the next level. So really, again, back to the communication side of it, it's important to be able to have that two-way communication and be able to bring that those skills forward. I thought that was helpful as we transitioned.
Yeah, I think it's always important, because you just never know who's there. And the downside to that, I think, let me know if both of you agree, is that if there's not the right communication between the current leadership owner of the company to the leadership team and the culture, the people that are there, about how this transition is going to happen, and the smoothness of it, and what's been done to make it a smooth transition, to kind of make them feel comfortable, right? Is that you can end up with some, kind of some rough terrain that you kind of got to work through. Would you agree with that, Tom?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, I think communication is the bottom line, no matter how you do this. It's
Yeah.
if that's been I guess I'll call that a key point in my working and growing the company and working with my employees. One thing I hadn't mentioned is I come from a background where of coaching. My dad was a coach, I'm a coach, and I'm also a ski instructor. And so teaching and communicating is something that apparently is in my genes. And I know that I get much, much better results from everybody when they know what I expect from them. So the communication factor is what you're after.
Yeah. So, and that's great. I think, certainly if you don't have the communication and lay out the expectations of what's kind of expected of them and where you are, to your point, Tom, as the new coach coming in, right, is just the players are there and they're just looking for someone to kind of lead them and continue on, and give them that security that not only do they have a job, but what's the future of the company and where is it going, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of that can happen. We don't know. I mean, if it's a sale of a business that you bought, or you're selling to an outsider, that's a completely different dynamic than if you're transitioning it to family members who the current culture and leadership can be pretty familiar with over time, and start to grow more comfortable with, because they kind of see how they've grown and matured over a period of time, and they feel comfortable, continuing that path with the new regime in the chair, so to speak, right? Dean, you look at making an acquisition. When you were going down that path to expand and continue to grow your business, and looking at another business to buy, any unexpected challenges that you saw as you kind of went through that process that maybe you didn't think of initially when you kind of started the process?
First and foremost, the length of time that it takes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's When we got early in discussions, we were looking at this should be done in X amount of time, and then just the amount of information that needs to be conveyed back and forth is enormous. And so, planning out enough, again, to get enough runway, if you would, that all these steps need to be done, and that they just don't happen overnight. That the communication back and forth between the attorneys, between the different groups of people, they do take time. And then as you dive deeper into the transition, you peel back some areas that need to be discussed with the transition owner, and you have to work through those. So setting up enough time to get through the transition is important, in my opinion. Having looked back at it, it does take time to bring all the pieces together. And then you add COVID into the mix, and then that changes the dynamics again. Looking back, nobody would ever plan for a pandemic to occur, but having we all live through it now, and you have to even consider something like that major occurring. In what if this happens, and then how do you jog this way and head down that path for a little bit to get back to center? It just takes time to get through all those different steps, and so plan for the future. It does take time.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that great comment on the pandemic. I know we're all probably exhausted from hearing about it, but I think it creates an opportunity to really find out, when you're acquiring a company, in your case, Dean, as to like, how well does a company pivot, and how well does the management team work inside of that environment. So you kind of, I don't know if did you get a chance to see kind of how they function during that period of time? Because you kind of have to pivot how you operate. Certainly the pandemic brought its own unique situations of how we could get to people, whether they would accept deliveries and things of that nature. Did it give you a better feeling as you kind of move forward on that transaction, that, hey, this is a really good environment to be in, and they've got some good core people here working?
Yes, absolutely. The slowdown, it created an opportunity to look at those processes, and as those processes, it's like, how do we put plexiglass up, and how to, again, to your point, how do we accept that delivery? But what we're looking at is, if this company can survive, and in certain areas they grew during the pandemic, that's what I felt was important. That reassured me that this is a good transition and moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Tom, you've had a pretty established company that you've grown over, 25, 30 years plus. You guys have probably, you guys have obviously managed through a pandemic with what you guys have to do. There was probably some good lessons in that for your business as to what you've put into place to really say, maybe we need to polish these up a little bit, but then also take a look at some of the ones that were working really well and say, hey, we did some really good things in these areas, right?
Yeah, setting aside all the requirements of the pandemic, the work from home, the screens that I heard Dean talk about, the difficulty just in generating the office, also pushed us forward a little bit into more of the electronic age. And in my business, in the heavy business, if you will, heavy equipment and excavating, it doesn't seem like that would strike that much, but we actually have made a shift, and we're implementing it slowly. We have now 5 different crews in the field using electronics to record their time from iPads instead of having to come back here to the shop. Those iPads also have our plans on them instead of rolled up paper plans, which turn into a mess after a while in a pickup truck. There's different programs out there that make viewing the plans and scaling the plans, getting your time recorded. All of that has enabled us to begin to minimize what I call waste time or office time, where they all reported back to here, they all recorded their time. I've pushed the foreman a little bit harder than I have in the past, and that's more maybe my fault, even in the day of paper. but now one person per job's in charge of recording everything, so we know the accuracy is a little bit better. We we're making a move, somewhat forced by the pandemic, into today's electronics, and as we do so, we're discovering that they certainly do what everybody said they will do, and they probably do it better than they tell you they will do it. You read some glowing reports and you usually discount those, but the capacity of the electronics, and probably more importantly, is the capacity of your employees to get a grip on those electronics and utilize them to everybody's advantage is I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older, but it's hard to wrap your mind around that. But yet my son thinks nothing of it. And this move toward efficiency and actually toward empowering the employees to help us out is, they've taken a hold of it. I think they appreciate it. And I think that we're going to reap some benefits, as will they, in some of the efficiencies that occur on our jobs.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yep. Go ahead, Dee.
Tom, I may have to hit you up on that. We're looking to implement some iPads in a few situations, so I'm going to have to reach out to you and talk through that with you. See about your experiences.
It's interesting. I'm doing a lot of learning right now as I'm getting ready to exit. I'm doing a lot of learning, but
yeah. Well, I think what it says. Yeah, you're right, Dean. I think it is. I think it's so the challenge is there is if a company is not kind of progressing to a certain extent with technology, how to make your efficiencies better, right? And I think that's where technology really helps. Is it doesn't replace the people; it just helps them become a little bit more efficient. It takes away from maybe carrying a ton of paper or a ton of files with you, and you have the technology that can be there, so you can pull up the files. To Tom's point, you can pull up the blueprints and things of this nature without getting them all destroyed and whatnot, just from carrying them around, just by day-to-day wear and tear, so to speak, right? And so, how is your company really progressing in the area of technology is really kind of a great question to ask yourself as an owner. Every business is going to be a little bit different as to how much technology it can handle. And then I would also probably suggest is just take it at a reasonable rate. You don't have to do it at 95 miles an hour and start throwing in a ton of technology, and then you kind of get behind the 8 ball, and now you got to catch up with it. So just start with one piece, and you kind of keep building onto it from there. One of the questions one of the participants had for either one of you, they're a smaller company in the manufacturing and welding area, and they're really looking to sell the business to their son. Any information that you've experienced, either one of you, Tom or Dean, when you're doing this, that you might be able to give some insight to them when you get ready to transition the business over? Tom, I know you're in the midst of it, so maybe I'll let you go first.
Again, there's a lot. I would say that even if your family member, son, daughter, doesn't matter, even if they're not going to participate in certain parts of the business, because they're going to take over your role as an owner at some point is the goal. I think it's real important that they learn the business. I've watched other businesses do this with upcoming managers. My son worked for me on occasion as he's going up through school, and I had him work for other people to try to gain some experience working for other people. But I had him, he spent a summer sorting rock, and that sounds silly, but selling rock is one of the things we do, and some of the rock is very difficult to classify with machinery. So he used some machinery and some physical strength and sorted rock. These are small rock. And another summer he spent rebuilding a community septic system, I should say septic systems, plural, because basically they gutted numerous septic tanks, put in new modern pumps and efficiencies. So he got his feet dirty, if you will, and muddy, learning the stuff at the bottom. And now he's learning the stuff that I do and the communication effort. I think that whoever's going to take over your company from a family role has got to run through the whole gamut, so that when they ask another employee to do something, they have at least an understanding of what it is they're asking them to do. And if they get pushback, they have enough experience to recognize whether that's just somebody blowing smoke or whether they can push back and expect something from them. So gaining experience, even if it's not tons of it, in every department and every function. From in my business, when I talk about departments, that's a little silly, but we have laborers, we have operators, we have a mechanic, we have drivers, and we do different kinds of jobs. And to learn those, then you learn what you expect from your employees. And then he steps into my shoes and the shoes of my estimators, and he meets customers, and he learns what they expect and what we can do, because expectations from customers are quite often different than the reality. And a little education goes a long ways in selling a job and making sure that the customer's happy with the results you provide them. So I think somebody in the family really needs to move around a lot. They need to experience one department, then another department, and participate and do that stuff, not just watch somebody else do it. If you just watch, it's kind of like sitting in the back of a classroom and not really paying attention. Yeah, you were there. Yeah, you probably caught a few things, but if you don't participate and put your hands on it, you learn a lot more when your hands get put on it, I guess is my point.
Yeah, that's some great points. Thank you for that. Dean, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, the ability to have your son or daughter work for another company and see how those skills could apply. You know, as you work outside of your company and you learn and develop relationships with within that framework, being able to then apply those skills and not just what we do, but how other people are actually doing business, and add that to the different functions and inside of your business. I think that's the great coupling effect of bringing the skills together. So it is understanding the business thoroughly, but taking some additional skills and compiling those with what we share. I think that's the right the method for moving forward.
Yeah,
well.
I think it's a great points from both of you. And just to kind of add a little bit is, not everybody is designed to be an owner of a company. And as much as we may want our children or grandchildren to be an owner of a company, sometimes we just have to come to the conclusion that that's not really their skill set, and that's not such a bad thing after all. They still can be pretty active in the business, and they can run some roles. They still could have stock in the company, but they're not going to really be the one up in the kind of like, as we call, the CEO chair, right? So there's still some ways that you can work around that. But I think they both made some good points. Is the more that you have the next generation working in the business and understanding how the different departments or divisions that you have, and they understand how all the work that you do gets done and the importance of that, will certainly help you determine, are they ready to take on an ownership role? And then what would that look like? And then where are their strengths and where are some of the opportunities they have for improvement? As everybody does, as we kind of go through any journey whatsoever, and how to help them become a better leader and mentor to the company to kind of move them into the next piece of what they need to do. So it does take time. And I think that's kind of a theme that we always hear when we're talking about different topics, is the more time that you give the business and the more time you give yourself as an owner to bring that next generation into the mix, the smoother and better off that really will kind of really be. So let's talk a little bit about health. And Dean, help the group kind of understand, where do you think health would become a challenging aspect if you were making a transition or coming into as an ownership? How do you think that really could shift or pivot things in a very quick way?
Uh, to clarify, health of the owners,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
as in physical health.
Physical health, right? Or
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's well, being an owner, it does take a lot of physical effort and mental effort and time. So endurance is the key there. So staying healthy, I think, is keeps a positive attitude, and being able to project that attitude to the employees is key. So through the transition, we had one individual that was having some health issues, and so who's going to take over that position? Health is part of that transition. It
Mm-hmm.
does come into play, and so, a backup plan to the plan is good. But as far as an individual, as an owner, being, trying to stay healthy and be able to get all the different things done in the course of a day, because there's never enough time. So, health is important, and so we try to stay active, and I think that's important to be able to be healthy as you own and operate a business, is to have the energy to get everything done.
Yeah, yeah, it could also be a huge problem if you were getting ready to transition out and not all the information was there, and it could just change the whole dynamic, right? If a serious health issue were to pop up, these are things that are uncontrollable, and we don't certainly wish them out there, but they can happen. I know, I know that we have experienced it with a couple of owners, and I know of other companies that have had a similar situation, where a serious health issue has come, and it just kind of throws the company into, a different direction for at least a short period of time to kind of catch their breath and kind of be able to get some more traction to move over. Tom, did you experience anything on your end from the previous ownership, or anybody that when you started to take over time where health might have kind of impacted some of the decision making?
The previous owner did not. I mean, that was, I don't know, that was almost, again, keep in mind, it was a very small company, but this transaction happened. It did take a year. I mean, it was brought up to me, and I laughed, and I said, well, I got $1,000 in my bank account. What would you like me to buy? And it out. But in the end, health really had nothing to do with it. The training period of that summer, when it was brought up in the spring, was somewhat lax. I did do some estimating for them. I kind of ran the crews more and more, but not a lot. And when I say crews, it was a crew of 5 or 6 of us. And then over the winter, that business didn't do much, and he didn't. I went back to teaching skiing in the wintertime that particular winter. But we went through all the banking stuff and finally got everything approved, and boom, the next thing you know, in April, I'm an owner, and where do I go? So that his health had very little to do with it. But now, as we've advanced up to where we're at today, it does concern me, not so much for mine. I think I do pretty good, but man, every now and then you read about somebody who just passed away and they're younger, and I'm certainly not looking at that. I try to keep myself in good shape, but my office staff, which is really what makes this business run, we have 3 estimators now. If one fell off the ladder, so to speak, got sick or had a family event, myself or even my son could step in and fill those shoes temporarily. We have some resiliency there. My office manager, she's been on her own for quite a while, but we have hired a person to learn her skill. So I've tried to set the business up with some backup. I don't like the thought process that you have one person that does everything, and if they got sick, somebody in your family got sick, you'd be up the creek without a paddle. And it would take you quite a few weeks to recover from that, let alone try to advance from it. So I've done everything I can, along with my son helping me to find some of this help, to set ourselves up where there's some and I call it redundancy, but they're not doing the same exact job. They just have knowledge of the other job. They're learning each other's jobs. They can step up to the plate if they need to. And I think that we put together a very, very good staff here. And the truth is, I'm getting very close to trying to get me removed from the day-to-day operations. I'm not there yet, but we've set a mandate that I'm going to start taking some more time off, and I'm quite confident that our crew will handle that. Probably the coolest thing is when I start doing that, I might figure out how good it feels and how good the
Yeah, for
staff
sure.
is, and go from there. But so health issues haven't affected me yet, but I think we've worked really hard to try to prevent that from being a major issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, I think it, doing some of the cross training that you're doing over there, Tom, I think is very great. And just really kind of outlining what are the job descriptions, what are the KPIs that are set up for each and every single area that is very important to the business, and really giving any new person an opportunity to really get up to speed really quickly, when they come in, and understanding it that if that does happen, then you can pivot a lot more. And that's a unique word in the business. Like, how well do you pivot when challenging times, whatever that might be, come? I'll share a brief story before we go to the next question. Is a client of ours here in Michigan. There were two partners, and there was a little bit of an age difference between the two of them. But in the last year, the one partner, the younger partner, bought out the older partner very quickly because he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And so that really, I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking to get back together here again soon just to pick up on our conversation. But the point is, he had shared with me, he said, Vince, I'm 38 years old. I really love what I do. And they're in the construction business. And he says, but this really kind of threw me for a loop, because first, he's here, and even though he's still around, he's no longer part of the company. And I guess what added kind of another layer of really challenge to them is the year before that, a key person that they were targeting to come into ownership of the company had a fatal car accident over a weekend. And so they lost that person also. And so it's just, I think planning and understanding in your business is really important no matter what happens, and trying to just tackle the things. And growing a business has constant movement in it of what you're just thinking of as an owner, and just jotting down some ways that things can be handled as you kind of go through. So thanks, Tom, for sharing that. I know we're kind of getting close to about the last 10 or 15 minutes. I did want to remind the participants here, if you have any questions, please feel free to log them in under the chat box. I'd be happy to ask the group any questions that you might have that you might want to, get some clarification on, as we kind of go through it. Let's talk a little bit about, what you've learned along the way as an owner, and how you have changed the way that you do business based on maybe what you've learned from the very beginning when you came into the business. And so maybe when you came into the business, you saw things done a certain way, and just over time and experiences and education and just maturity, how you probably potentially handle things a lot differently inside of the business. Dean, do you have anything you'd like to share with the group?
Yes. So one of the things that I felt was a learning experience is the ability to delegate the time that you need to get a function done. It was really an eye opener to know and to see how much time it takes to get things done. So as we went through the different areas of the company, and it's like, how do we improve the turnaround time from the initial contact to closing a sale? Is all right, let's put some sales processes in place to allow us to shorten that timeline, which then turns around, brings money back to the company quicker. So again, the cash flow Sorry. So this function affects the cash flow, and then that's important to us expanding or buying additional inventory. So looking at that was, I thought was really important, and understanding the importance of the cash flow to the business. Um, you know that you need to have profit, and you know that profit allows the company to grow. But you know, the turn of the cash was a big an area that I focused on, and was able to shorten that sales cycle down, and then bring that cash into the business to allow us to grow. Another area that was, I think, important is to realize that, you know, to have outside advisors to work with, whether it was continually going to score meetings and in building a relationship with outside people. Vince, we met a couple of years ago through a score opportunity, and I showed up on a summer day, and we met, and since then, you know, we've communicated and built our relationship. But again, those relationships, they do take time, and you know, building some network that allows you to reflect back, ask questions of other people. How did you do this, and how did this apply to the area of, let's say, moving freight from point A to point B? You know, what trucking companies are you using? What do you see that's happening with the current rates? Those are all little bits and pieces of information that help to run the business, but they don't happen overnight. They did build on each other through the years and through the months, and so you need to have all those pieces in place, and it's a continual learning process.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom, anything you'd like to add to that?
You know, I think I've learned to become somewhat more tolerant, I guess would be the wording I'll use. When I was young and thought I knew everything, my expectations were quite high of not only people, but of performance and even my customers. And through time, you learn that kind of like making the transition to my son, is people do things differently, and you have to be open to their version of what's right. If it's not right, sometimes there's just mixes that don't work. But your way is not always the only way. It's certainly not always. You'd like to think your way is always the right way, but it's certainly not the only way. And some tolerance and some ability and some understanding when it comes to employees. You know, the bad ones almost right away, and they don't last very long. But the good ones, you recognize, you try to keep them on, and people make mistakes, and some tolerance to that and communication usually will resolve any issues versus it flying off the handle and a quick fire. I don't really see the benefit, as I'm sure everybody that may be listening here knows. Finding employees is a very, very difficult thing to do. So communicating with employees so that they understand your expectations and correcting mistakes is much more important than just saying, oh, there's another one growing on the apple tree out there. They're not. They're a part of your family, and you have to treat it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point, Tom. We have time for one more question. One of the participants sent in a question. For general understanding, what size was your company when you started compared to the size of your company now? And then what was one of the greatest learning experiences in taking the company to its new current level? Who'd like to go first, Dean or Tom?
Good, Dean.
Well, when I started the business, it was zero income. So from there, we grew to just under 3 million, and then with the acquisition, that'll put us closer to 6 million. So that growth, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And the process of planning to know that you're going to get, you know, Vince and I talk, and you know, without having those KPIs in place, there isn't a huge part of getting to that next level. Is that you've got a checklist that gets you from point A to point B to point C, and then you know where those are involved, how those are important to getting from point A to point B to point 3. point C there. So the growth will happen if you're persistent, but using those KPIs as guidance to get you there, I think is hugely important.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom, anything you'd like to add?
Well, we covered a little bit. I started with my wife and I think it was 3 or 4 other employees. We're now up into the 30s. Our sales have gone up and down over the years. Right now we're on a running record. This hopefully will be our 3rd record sales year in a row. The one thing I have learned is that, and this is more of a business decision. It goes a little bit against some of the stuff I've said, but you got to build a reserve, and you can't spend your way out of a recession trying to keep all your key employees busy. When you slow down, you just got to start dropping the layoff axe. And I spent myself into a pretty good hole about 15 years ago, managed to recover it, and now our goal is to make sure we have a pretty good reserve to bounce us through what I expect fairly soon to be another downturn in the economy. And I only expect that because I've not seen the economy go this long, this hard in lieu of all the poor things that have happened with the pandemic, the crazy growth in the economy, the lack of inflation. I think this is all going to, personally, I think it's going to get twisted around a little bit. And I'd say buckle your seatbelt, make sure you've got a reserve.
Yeah. I think it's great. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to go through, but out of just respect of everybody's time, I want to keep it to an hour. I want to thank Dean and Tom for being here today as panelists and really kind of sharing some of the experiences that they've kind of gone through in the journey kind of being a business owner. I hope all of you have gotten some things out of it and able to take away 1 or 2 things that maybe that will help you kind of better plan as you kind of move forward. This series, as we have defined it as a Fireside Chats, is really designed for you, the business owner, to kind of learn from other business owners, from some of their experiences, both good and bad, to help you think through and implement things that will help you continue to grow your business. And growth doesn't always mean you're going from 3 to 6 to 8 to 10 to 15 and on up and on up. There could be a kind of a sweet spot of where you think your company is really going to function really well at, and kind of staying in there and increasing profits and moving forward. So again, thank all of you for being here today. I would like to just kind of say in closing and wrapping everything up, if you haven't already, and if you're interested, certainly take a look at the emails that come out. Our next Fireside Chat will be on June 15th. And we'll be talking about the 8 key value drivers and how they help to build value inside of a business. So we'll have two new business owners that will be volunteering their time to kind of come through and share some of their experiences as to how this has worked for them. What are some of the things you need to do as an owner to help you kind of prepare for and to go and do that. So again, Tom and Dean, thank you so much. Everybody else, thank you as participants. We will be kind of dubbing this out for being logged up on our website, and then I will send it all out to you on an email so that you have it if you want to refer back to it at any point. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email myself, and we'll get any answers back to you that we can. Hope that all of you have a great day. Thank you so much for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.